Insurgency, corruption and poverty. Is the dark side of India overshadowing the light? Or is the world's largest democracy still strong and on track? I'm the outsider. This is our motion tonight. India is ripe for revolution. Speaking in favour of that view, Shankar Aiyar, a former Indian diplomat turned politician. He served in Manmohan Singh's first cabinet from 2004 to 2009. And with him, Aruna Roy, widely known as a social and political activist. She's one of the founders of the movement for the right to information in India. Speaking against the motion, Dipankar Gupta, former professor of sociology and social anthropology at Nehru University. And Baijayant Panda, known to my relief as Jay, Panda, former businessman, now filling a seat in the lower house of parliament and representing the state of Orissa. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. So please let me turn first to Shankar Aiyar and ask for your top 3 points in support of the motion.
Number one, I think the question's wrong. India, is it ripe for revolution? Well, we already have revolt against the state in 1/3 of the country. That's about 100, that's nearly 200 districts, of whom 78 are categorized as LWE, left-wing extremism affected. Second, we have a situation where the approach document to the 12th plan says that when the economy was growing at an average of over 8% per annum, the rate of poverty alleviation was under 0.8% per annum. Third, a statement by the Ambit Capital CEO of Bombay to the Indian Express saying that a little over 100,000 Indian families out of a population of 120 million had wealth in the amount of $477 billion in 2007, which was expected to triple to over $1 trillion by this year. Now, in a situation where growth is leading to such wide disparities and where the poorest of the poor are either not on the trajectory of growth or have been pushed off it, is it surprising that in tribal India, we have the revolt against the stealing of their wealth by capitalists who are trying to get into their wealth at their expense? 65 million Indian tribals have been displaced in the last 65 years. It's a shocking situation unless and until we are able to reach the benefits of growth to the people where they live. And that's Panchayati Raj. If you have effective Panchayati Raj, we may still
These are your
stop the
local
revolution.
district councils.
But otherwise, there is no, I'm not sitting on the fence. I'm saying India is ripe for revolution, but it doesn't mean the mango will fall off the tree. We have a way of stopping it, but we are not doing enough about getting the benefits of growth down to the people. There is a small segment of our society which is cornering almost all the benefits of growth. The net result is we have a private residence in Mumbai, where we are talking today, which is the most expensive home in the world.
What makes you think that the revolution is round the corner? What would be the spark that would actually ignite a full-scale revolution in India, which is what you're talking about?
It's not a spark. It's a slow-moving fire. It has spread through 200 districts of rural and tribal India. But because our country is so divided between the rural and the urban, between the rich and the poor, sitting here in Mumbai, you can barely see the flames licking at us.
But how, when India is so divided, are you ever going to get anybody to agree on a revolution?
I don't think it's going to be a Mao-led revolution. It is dissatisfaction to the extent
but it's
where
so many
in a factory,
disparate different groups.
It may be.
You've got 17 languages on each banknote. How are you going to get everybody to agree to stage a revolution?
If you can get democracy in this country, it's the only one in such a diverse nation which has democracy, then I think you can unite people around a cause.
But power is more and more devolved in this country, isn't it? More and more out to the regions.
Unless it gets
Chief ministers are getting much more powerful than they used to.
Unless it gets very, very much more than that. The kind of dissatisfaction we've not only seen in tribal India, but much more importantly, very recently, at the Maruti Suzuki factory in Manesar, where It was stated officially by the Home Ministry that the CBI is investigating the possibility of a Naxalite hand in that ghastly
All right, but
violence.
Shankar, Aiyar, there is this unstoppable optimism in India, isn't there? I mean, a survey done in 2010, 9 out of 10 Indians say their country is or will become one of the most powerful nations in the world.
I don't
it's
know.
a hugely confident country.
Where did-
and you say that this is revolution just around the corner. This is Pew Research. This was done by the American Pew Research.
Yeah, I don't know where they went, but I would like them to go into those 78 LWE districts and tell us that 90% of the people there think that everything's fine and we're going to get forward. The facts on the ground.
But it's one thing to be unhappy. It's quite another to stage a revolution.
There's a revolution, Tim, taking place in 78 districts of India.
It's an insurgency, Shankar. They're very different, aren't they?
If you're going to play with
different
words,
hands.
If you're going to play with words, we have areas of India where neither the state government nor the central government can even go in.
But it doesn't.
And that's the shape the revolution is taking in our country.
It doesn't threaten the security of the government in Delhi, does it?
It threatens the security of the nation, which is far more to the point. The Prime Minister of the government in Delhi has said that Naxalism is the single biggest threat to the internal security of our country.
Okay, Shankar, we have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Could I please ask Dipankar Gupta to speak against the motion? Your top 3 points, please.
Well, no matter which way you look at it, India seems to be ripe for a revolution. I mean, look at the poverty figures.
You're on the wrong side.
No. I think I'm on the right side, but let me work out my argument. India is ripe for the revolution on many counts. We have very high poverty figures. The government of India may say 28, but then somebody else says 42, Saxena says 50, and a big hitter like Arjun Sen Gupta says 70 plus. So that's obviously a situation where India should be, revolting any minute. Besides that, you have the high IMR rates, you have MMR rates, you have all kinds of things happening in this country which are really quite disturbing. Is India ripe for a revolution? It seems as ripe and ready to be plucked. But in my view, it is not ripe for a revolution for one major reason. That is, we are less poor today than we were 3 or 4 decades back. Even so, the fact of the matter is that all down history, no matter where you go, which country you go to, which period you go to, the poor people never revolt. The poorer you are, the less likely you are to revolt. And what keeps India from revolution is that the numbers of poor are just too high. They're so high, they're thinking about the next meal, they can't think of a revolution. To have a revolution of the proper old-fashioned classical kind, there are 3 conditions that have to be met. Condition number 1, fight against colonialism. Condition number 2, there should be dictatorship or a monarchy. And condition number 3, you must have a leadership that behaves like a vanguard. All 3 are missing in contemporary India. So if you look at the requirements of a revolution, we don't seem to have it. At the same time, I'll also say this much. There's a revolution that's waiting to happen, but it's unfortunately not being discussed and not on the cards right now. And that is a democratic revolution. And that is a democratic revolution. And that democratic revolution is one where citizenship is substantive. People get citizenship in a substantive fashion. It's just not a legal citizenship.
I have to stop you there. Professor Gupta, thank you very much indeed. You say the poor never revolt. You haven't been watching the Arab world in the last year and a half, have you?
Well,
it's hardly been the rich revolting, has it, the Arab world?
Well, if you think that's a revolution, then you and I have to disagree. I think there are.
Well, what do you think it is when they got rid of a president in Egypt and established
it was an uprising of
free
sorts.
votes?
It was an uprising.
Free votes. They've been to the polls now 5 times for free votes, and they freely elected for the first time in their history their president. That's kind of a revolution, isn't it?
But look at it this way. I told you 3 conditions. One was democracy.
Yeah, but you also said poor people never revolt.
Poor people on their own.
These were not rich people.
But remember one thing. If you believe that the people on the streets of Cairo were poor people and poor people alone, then it wouldn't have worked.
Were you there?
I wasn't there.
I was.
But I wasn't.
I didn't see too many rich. I didn't see too many Mercedes and Rolls Royce in Tahrir Square.
If you're expecting rich people to be the ones driving Mercedes, then you have a very, very narrow definition of the rich. What I'm trying to say is that anybody who doesn't have a Mercedes is not necessarily poor. And the point really is that if you're really that poor, like India is, you can't have a revolution of that order. Nobody has, even Mao Zedong
So
agreed.
you think the patience of the
Mao,
people is limitless?
Even Mao said that to be able to make a revolution, you must have something in your granary.
So what you're telling us tonight, if you're to be believed, is the patience of India's people, it's poor, it's 600 million people who are living below $2 a day, is limitless. That nothing, yes,
it's
so
not
their
patience.
patience is
it's not
limitless.
patience, it's frustration. They can't do it. They're weaponless, they're impotent. It's not patience at all.
You've got insurrection in a third of districts. Who's weaponless?
Well, you see,
there are plenty of weapons.
On that, we can.
Did you see the fighting in Assam?
On that, we can disagree.
Over recent weeks?
No, listen. You can have insurrection. You can have lawlessness, and I think what's happening today in India, especially with the rise of urbanization, with the fact that so many people are now leaving the village to come to the city and towns, and that there's no room for them, there is enough scope for unrest, lawlessness, and insurrection of the kind that comes up today and goes tomorrow. But if you want a revolution that changes the order of things, then you have to think differently. And I feel for that to happen,
it would be very dangerous to assume that after what's been happening in 2011. Very dangerous when you look at the new movement. Well, as you said yourself, it spelt success wherever ordinary people stayed ordinary and pushed as one for a single cause. Those are your words. You wrote those.
Yeah.
The masses were often led by little people whose lives were too unremarkable to either register or envy.
Yes.
You wrote that too. Exactly against what you're saying, that the poor never revolt.
No. These are not poor people. I'm saying there's a one-point program against a dictatorship, one-point program against corruption works best. In recent years, that's what contemporary history tells us.
All right, Professor
If it's a
Gupta.
multi-pronged program, then it often comes to grief.
We have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much. Question to Aruna Roy, please. To your top points for speaking for the motion, please.
Well, I'm a woman. I believe my life is a revolution. That was the feminist slogan I grew up on. I believe that the word revolution has changed its context in the last 70, 80 years. Apart from the feminist movement, we have had Mahatma Gandhi, we have had JP's total revolution, which did not mean bringing down people with guns. It didn't mean completely changing and throwing people out in this way it has normally been defined. Jayaprakash, Mahatma Gandhi and other international movements have proved that today revolution means not only changing the structure, but changing the relationship between the citizen and the state. And I think in India, there are a million mutinies, million struggles unrecorded because people like Mr. Dipankar Gupta probably don't see the television, only see the television. They don't visit rural areas. But in rural areas, there are lots.
I've written about rural areas in great detail.
Please let her finish.
Please don't say that.
Later, but we are on a
You can counter her. You can counter her in a minute.
That's an unfair
You can counter her in a minute.
But anyway, but the point is that every movement I've been with has been led by poor people, and they are strong. And it's they who have the staying power to change India, and I don't think the middle class really has. That's my position. But in any case, once we expand the lexicon of what the revolution means today, look at the iniquities and the inequalities, look at the contradictions. You have grain rotting in godowns. You have people hungry. There's endemic hunger. Isn't this a case for people to revolt? And they are revolting. They are asking questions. You have a right to food bill, which has been stayed, which has not been passed by Parliament. Isn't this a right reason for people to ask questions? Now, the revolution today will not be with violence. There is a Mao corridor about whom Mani has spoken, so I won't speak about it again. But revolution has been redefined by many of us in the ways in which, as it was mentioned before, the democratic relationships between the citizen and the state have to be redefined in a manner in which we have access to information and we also know and keep people accountable.
Could you come to a close, please?
If you look at the civil disobedience or the satyagraha or the various issues about which Gandhi spoke, if you look at the numbers of struggles, people walking for land rights, you have the anti-nuke campaign, you have so many other things. So I do think that poverty, hunger, and all this cuts across languages, castes, every single other thing, and we can unite to fight for a more equitable, just, and equal India.
Aruna Roy, thank you very much. But that's what you've been fighting for anyway and succeeding. So why do you need more revolution? You said yourself with the national law, the right to information law in 2005, you've given millions of Indians the same power as their members of parliament, haven't you? To ask questions, to redistribute power in a democratic framework. What's so wrong with that? That is a revolution, isn't it?
It is a revolution.
Why aren't you happy with that?
Because the next step is accountability. There's no point just asking for information and proving that things are wrong. When you've proven that things are corrupt and institutions are corrupt, then there are no accountability systems.
But you've said
so
it's helped.
fighting for accountability systems.
You've said it's helped move towards more rational decisions based on fact, truth, and stated constitutional values in a democratic framework.
That's
so this
right.
is a huge step forward.
It is a step
it?
forward, but it brings us to the next step, where corruption, when it's proven, action is taken. Ansari was killed in Jharkhand. 15 to 20 RTI activists have lost their lives just because they brought out information. They've just been shot dead. If this isn't anarchy, if this isn't a complete deviation from the rule of law, if it's not lack of accountability,
it's deviation,
what is?
But my point is you're making progress. You, pressure groups, political activists are making progress across India.
But while we do
You're
this...
making progress with legislation and with pressure as well.
But while we do that, you have foreign capital coming in. There's POSCO, where people have been on strike for many years, where their voices have
But what
not been
does that
heard.
got to do with the National Rural
No.
Employment Guarantee Act you brought in 2005,
No,
or you helped
please,
bring in 2005? 100 days' work a year, guaranteed to
Yes, of
every
course.
family.
But
There's not going to be a revolution over that, is
the
there?
Rural Employment Guarantee Act is being snuffed out in rural India. Their voices are
you
not
didn't
being
say
heard.
that in April.
Their demand is not being recorded. I've just come back from a visit to 4 states, and they are saying you're not capturing the demand. The bureaucracy wants to kill it.
You
and
said
the
it's the
politician
first
wants
law.
to kill it.
You said
Yes,
it's the
it
first
was-
law that requires
No.
statutory social audits or public
But the
audits to be
social
carried
audits are
out.
not allowed to happen. People gang up, the mafia beats up people who want
So
a social
you'll fight
audit.
it as you have done in the past, and you'll get there. But you're a long way from revolution, aren't you?
I'm afraid the revolution, the word revolution will have to be redefined for India. We will have to fight for total change, and that is a revolution.
All right, Aruna Roy, thank you very much indeed. Jay Panda, your top 3 points, please, against the motion.
Over the last 65 years, since we became independent, the biggest thing that has happened in India is that previously disenfranchised groups, Dalits, for instance, who had been the underclass for hundreds and thousands of years, have got stakes in the system. For example, in the very first parliament, about 50% of the members were lawyers and journalists, and all from upper castes. This profile has changed dramatically if you look at the latest parliamentary figures. Economic growth, while some people insist on running it down, listen to what economist Jagdish Bhagwati of Columbia University has to say. And he says that this argument that economic growth has not benefited the Dalits, has not benefited the underclass of India, is fiction masquerading as non-fiction. And he claims that 200 million Indians have been pulled out of poverty over the last 2 decades. Listen to economist Amartya Lahiri, who's been studying Dalits and tribals, and he concludes that they have seen sharp improvements in their relative economic fortunes. It is true that there are signs of individual inequity. There are billionaires that have been created. But if you look at the Gini index, which measures such things, India is still better off than countries like China and several other countries. Let me give you an example. Yesterday, a national TV crew came to Kendrapada, which is my constituency in rural Odisha. And they were surprised at the high percentage of village roads which are now concrete. So India is in transformation. These villages, which until a few years ago were cut off from the rest of India during monsoons, today have access to other villages, have access to markets for their produce, have access to nearby towns. Livelihoods are changing, lives are improving. Does that mean that India is perfect? No. Does that mean that everything is optimal? No. There are warts, but warts and all, India is a positive transformation story. So my take is, there's not going to be a revolution in the classical sense where regimes are going to be changed. We have that opportunity every 5 years in elections, but there will be revolutions in education and healthcare and on many other areas that will transform India.
Okay, Jay Panda, thank you very much indeed. You talked about rural Orissa, your state. In Balangir, about 62% of the population live below the poverty line. Are you happy about that?
Not at all.
Your state accounts for nearly 20% of all malnutrition deaths in India. You have the highest infant mortality rate, 69 per 1,000 live births, and you talk about a little individual inequality, a little individual inequity.
Tim, if you're going to be honest, you must also mention that in the last 10 years, the sharpest drop in child malnutrition has been in Odisha. You should also mention that this government, to which we are opposed, this central government, has recently announced figures that show that Odisha has had the best improvement in poverty
but you
figures.
can't talk about a little inequity when 87% of the state lives in rural areas with an annual per capita income of $250 US.
My point is
which
that
is less
India
than
is a work
$1
in
a
progress.
day.
I understand.
It's
but
a bit more than a little inequality.
my
isn't
point
it?
is India is a work in progress, and you cannot run down the big picture by only looking at the glass as half empty.
But how long do you expect people who are suffering to this extent to wait for the benefits to trickle down?
I'm not talking about trickle-down economics here. I'm talking about changing the lives of people
No, I'm
at
talking
the
about how
grassroots.
long before they pick up a gun and they walk and they demand their entitlements.
Okay, so you're talking
in the great
about
modern India. How long? Do you
Well,
expect
because-
their patience to be infinite?
because I think they see lives changing around them, because they see their lives changing. Let me cite again the example of villages which used to be cut off and are not cut off anymore. I think people recognize that change is coming to them.
Who? The 476 out of the 240,000 households which are covered by the National Rural Employment Guarantee Schemes, they think that progress is coming to them? When did you last ask them whether they thought progress was coming to
I
them?
spend about 12 days a month in my constituency. I have nearly 2 million people that I try to reach out to and connect on a regular basis. I ask them all the time. And Tim, the optimism that you talked about earlier is true. It is in the grassroots. It is in the villages of India.
It's not coming from business leaders like Asim Premji, is it? He was talking about the violence at the Maruti plant, which your colleague was talking about, saying
Indeed.
the incident is representative of social unrest building up within the country.
Not just the Maruti plant, you talked also about the Assam violence. I think these are deplorable. But the fact is, violent incidents like these are fewer and further apart if you look at the track record of the last couple of decades.
Fewer and further apart. Look at the increase in the Maoist terrorism that
Okay.
India has seen. That's not fewer and further apart.
Let
is
me
it?
quote the
This is-
Economist.
This is a huge increase.
Let me quote The Economist, which has pointed out that, in fact, the movement is on the wane. Now, of the number of districts that are claimed to be under Maoist influence, in fact, the core influence that they have, where violence is really an issue which we ought to be concerned about, is a much smaller proportion.
All right, Jay Panda. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, a question to the audience. What is the larger risk to India's stability? Violence and insurgency, or poverty and hunger? The answer in a few moments. Join us then.